So when we look at Holyrood Palace, we maybe think of Mary Queen of Scots, and we think of dramas like the Rizzio murder, but perhaps we should also think of witches. And when I say witches, I'm talking about innocent, terrified, tortured, falsely accused people. And I want to introduce you to one. She's a young woman called Geillis Duncan. Now, Geillis had the bad fortune to be the maidservant to a man called David Seaton. He was a very paranoid and vicious bloke. Now, bad news, he also had legal powers. And that meant when she fell foul of him, he was able to arrest her and torture her in the privacy of his own home. So she'd been stopping out at night. She'd allegedly developed weird powers of healing. Now you might say, well, what's wrong with that? But there'd been a low-level witch hunt going on in East Lothian for at least a couple of years. And part of that was a suspicion that people were selling their souls to Satan for magical powers for things like healing. If I was Geillis, and I was a servant in the house with a violent, creepy man like David Seaton, I would be staying out of that house as much as possible. I mean, for one thing, she's got her own life. She'll want to go dancing, she'll want to go courting, she'll want to have fun. So, I mean, she would have had a lot of good reasons to stay out of David Seaton's house at night. So Geillis was tortured. Her fingers were crushed in a device called the pullywinks. A cord was twisted round her neck, and she was pricked for the devil's mark, which usually involves stripping someone naked, pricking them with long pins, and trying to find an insensible spot on their body. Now, the mark was found on her throat, and she confessed. And then she named names. She accused other people of being witches too. So this might have stayed as just a hideous example of local cruelty, but at some point around November 1590, it reached up to the ears of the King of Scots, King James VI. He was told that there'd been a whole group of witches, and they tried to raise storms to stop Queen Anna of Denmark, James's Danish bride, from coming to Scotland. So as the torturing went on, this became a fully fledged tale of how the witches sailed on the sea in sieves, boozing and feasting, heading for the old kirk at North Berwick. There they were going to meet the devil himself, it was said, and receive his orders. So come back to the 17th century with me. This is a society where people really believe in magic and supernatural beings. You could meet the devil walking down a street, so people really feared witches. You know, they could kill them, they could harm their animals, they could make the crops fail, they could drown them, you know, they could kill their children. Imagine, you know, if you thought witches were real and a witch could kill your child, you would be so afraid. So 17th century people live in a magical world, in a spiritual world where words work, and so they fear witches. James was told Geillis had played the Jew's harp at the witches' sabbath for a jaunty reel, and so she was forced to come to the royal court at Holyrood before the king himself, the Lord's anointed, who held power of life and death over her. And she was forced to play that reel as if it had all actually happened and not just been a fantasy made up by falsely accused and tortured people. James probably also interrogated Geillis. For a mere serving maid in front of a king, it must have seemed both dazzling and terrifying at the same time. Geillis tried to save her life by being a helpful and compliant witness. She agreed to all that was put to her. There was no point resisting. That would just have led to more torture. She was kept in prison for over a year, and it wasn't until she was led to the stake on Edinburgh's Castle Hill on a winter afternoon on the 4th of December 1591 that she finally felt able to tell the truth again, at least in part. She swore as she would answer to her God that two of the women she'd accused had been innocent, and what she'd said about them was but all leasings, it was all lies, that she'd been persuaded to say by the twa David Seatons in Tranent, father and son, and others who'd persuaded her to make the accusations. Geillis herself, as we know, was innocent, but she was strangled and burned along with another accused woman. And as the sky darkened on that December day, you would have seen for miles around the flames of that high up burning funeral pyre. So even today, people hold stereotypes about other people who are not like them. And sometimes these stereotypes get caught up with ideas about crime, that certain people are more likely to be criminals, that they're more likely to commit certain crimes. And when that happens, it's a real shortcut to miscarriages of justice and to hateful behaviour towards other people. So the witch hunt is a great reminder to us to check our stereotypes and think carefully before we leap to conclusions about other people.